Welcome, everyone, to Stepping Into Your Leadership. I'm your host, Christine Courtney. Our goal here is to give you some actionable takeaways that will help you lead your teams. Thanks for joining us on this leadership journey. Let's get started. Hello, everybody. Welcome to Stepping Into Your Leadership. I'm very excited today to have a fellow colleague, but also Texan in the studio today. Delise Simmons is here, and boy, oh boy, guys, when I tell you about her and you hear what she has to say, you're going to be very excited that you tuned in today. So first of all, let me introduce her a little bit. The way I came across Delise is because she is one of the most fantastic keynote speakers that I've ever seen. She works a lot doing Vistage talks around the country with CEO groups and key executive groups. She also has a awesome dynamite CEO group that I met with quite recently. But just to give you a little bit of her background, she now owns her own company, the Simmons Group, but she basically started her first real job, guys, was at Southwest Airlines. How cool is that? Yeah. I mean, we all learn, whether you're in business school or not, you know the lore of Southwest Airlines in terms of what it did for the customer experience and the people experience of working there. But she knows it firsthand because she was part of that process. She worked at Southwest Airlines, helped create the famous University of People there. And during her tenure, they got the award of top 10 places to work. Imagine top 10. This isn't top 1,000, top 500, top 10 places in the country to work. And she left Southwest to do a little thing like help start JetBlue Airways. So after doing that, she's created what I think is a really cool tool that we're going to talk about today a lot and dig into, which is the Culture Think Tank. And she's the Chief Culture Officer for Culture Think Tank. And she's going to figured out a way to get a real true ROI on work that people are doing around culture, training, and development. And so that speaks to me a lot. That's how her and I started our conversations together were around that tool, because I think it's a really cool thing that companies can do to measure what you're trying to get, the gains you're trying to get around culture. So anyway, with that, we'll hear lots more from her, but I just want to introduce Delise to you guys today. Hey, Delise.
Hey, Christine. Thank you so much for having me, and a big Texas yeehaw. Glad to have a fellow Texan that I can talk with.
We're going to have lots of y'alls today in this podcast.
Y'all can plan on it.
I hit on some of the background topics. I don't know if I missed anything, or messed up anything, but in general, kind of what inspired you? Because you've had a really full career with a lot of cool companies that you worked with. What inspired you to start Culture Think Tank? And maybe you could tell us a little bit about what that is.
Yeah, well, thank you. My jobs in my life have really kind of been serendipitous. So I started off at Southwest. I did not have any experience to do what they had me doing. It was just late 1980s, right place, right time. And I think I was attracted to Southwest. I get accused of liking cults, and I mean benevolent cults, but I graduated from the University of Texas, but I also went to Texas A&M, and I don't think there's a bigger cult than Texas A&M. The church that I went to was kind of cultish in that, not that they tried to take you away from your family and lock you in a room, but big following, people believing the same thing, and kind of that praise whole thing. And then Southwest is the same kind of thing. It was this cult, this organization where people really loved what they did, and I'm just attracted to what makes people want to join something and then do it with such enthusiasm that it really does change the game in terms of performance. So what I've been frustrated with in my career up until about 2017 was I knew that what we did worked, and I knew that if other leaders would do it too, it would work for them, but I couldn't prove it. So in 2017, we created the Culture Think Tank to prove that culture does have an ROI, that culture can be measured, that culture can be manipulated and worked on and improved. And it's not just a feeling we have. So that part of what I talk about is kind of debunking that myth that culture is kind of this esoteric other thing. It's a behavioral phenomenon. And if it's about behaviors, then we can measure it, we can improve it, and we can change the way that we work together.
What I remember when you talked about it, and I love what you said about cults, because certainly my company, we have been accused of that before in the past as well, right? Is this just happy cult of people that never want to leave? And
you can't spell culture without cult, baby. Come on.
There you go. There you go. But I was curious, when you're talking about the culture think tank, what are those things that you're measuring? Like, I love that you're proving it for people, but what are those things that you looked at and said, these are the things that are important?
Well, one of the biggest things that I find that leaders are doing incorrectly, and we're measuring it away from that, is I think a lot of leaders are chasing employee happiness. And I don't mean to sound like I'm negative or cynical, but I don't think it's our job as leaders to make employees happy. I think happiness is a choice that people have. I think it's our job as leaders to make sure our employees are safe, make sure they're challenged, make sure they're encouraged, make sure that they have meaningful work. If they choose to be happy after that, that's certainly their choice. But I think too many people think that culture and happiness have something to do with each other. They might in the end correlate, but our role as leaders, I don't believe, is to do that. So with a culture think tank, we measure how people feel, because what we know is that an employee that feels supported and feels encouraged and feels engaged will behave differently than an employee that feels disconnected, feels unheard. Those behaviors are going to be different. If culture is indeed a behavioral phenomenon, the best indicator, the best leading indicator of how people are going to behave is to understand how they feel. So at the culture think tank, we want to know how employees feel, because then we can predict how they're going to behave. If we predict how they behave, then we've got your culture locked up for you.
I love it. I love it, because how many that we're finally that businesses are talking about feelings, right? It is, instead of that we are thinking beings that occasionally feel, is that, science, that researcher that wrote, no, we are feeling beings who sometimes think.
Exactly. Absolutely. Yeah. But the question becomes, what feelings are we looking for, and what feelings are kind of not really indicative of any change in performance? So during the pandemic, one of the feelings that came up more than anything else was anxiety. And we've been tracking data. The data component that we have at the Culture Think Tank, we've been keeping records on employee sentiment, employee feelings since 2009. So we can show some really interesting baseline before COVID, during COVID, and then during an election year. So during an election year, long about, let's say, August, we start to see anxiety go up. And then with a successful transition of power, by February, March, we start to see that anxiety drop. It hasn't happened this year. And this isn't a political commentary one way or the other. It just is. So anxiety it spiked during COVID, and it's gone down a little bit. But the interesting thing about anxiety is we can show a causal relationship between high levels of organizational anxiety and things that we don't want to see, like higher turnover, lower employee satisfaction, lower employee engagement. There are some feelings that we get very sensitive to, that if there are high levels of those kind of feelings, we know it's going to affect and influence your culture and your performance in a negative way.
Interesting. So if you see that, right, like if you start seeing that trend and you know that it isn't necessarily about that company, but you're seeing it across various companies, what do you say to the people, whether it's, I don't know, are you talking to HR people? Are you talking to business leaders, whoever it is, those companies, what do you tell them to do? Is it just that they need to know, this is just, you can't control this? Or is it, here are some things you can do to help it? What's your advice?
It's such a great question, because what we're finding is these levels of anxiety are spiking. They're also really high in the generations that are coming into the workforce. And, sometimes people talk about millennials as if they're these children running around. Millennials are 40. So,
yeah.
So the Generation Z and Generation Alpha are coming in with higher levels of anxiety than we've ever seen, or they're willing to talk about it. They're willing to own it, where, my generation, we just kind of rubbed dirt on it. We didn't talk about it. So when we've got these higher levels of anxiety and we're leaning into it, our leaders don't know what to do. If I come to you as my leader and I say, hey, I'm really suffering from some anxiety today, our leaders don't know what to do with that. They're like, sorry, go home. I don't know what to tell you. So helping leaders to understand that if people feel heard, if they feel understood and they feel accepted, then those are the things that we can do as leaders to help mitigate anxiety. We're not supposed to be therapists. That's not where our role is. But as leaders, our people are coming to us with their issues, and they're coming with their intact feelings, and that's going to influence and affect performance. So I want my leaders to know, what do I do if someone comes to me and talks about having anxiety? Do we have an EAP, some sort of an employee assistance program that people can go to? Because at the end of it, in my estimate, I believe that culture truly is the one thing we can control that can influence our performance more than anything else. And the way that people come in feeling in our organizations are going to influence and affect the culture, and hence the performance.
Yeah. So interesting. Yesterday I was in Dallas at a conference for one of the big five consulting firms, and we were doing a workshop on networking. And in the past, to your point, when with older generations, when we'd ask like what gets in the way of networking, the answers from the audience, and there's like 200 people in the room, right? The answers were very much like, it feels uncomfortable, or I don't know what to say, or, I don't know a lot of people here, or I don't drink, whatever their answers were. Now the first answers were, it releases my anxiety. Anxiety came in from the first 5 comments that we got. And this is out loud. They're saying this, in a very conservative company. And I thought, wow, what a difference. I would never have gotten that years ago, and these are young people.
Yeah. And there isn't the stigma in today, thank God, that mental health has been destigmatized somewhat, not completely, but there is less of a stigma and even around how people, whether or not they seek treatment. So there's treatment options online. I had a friend the other day, a woman I work with, and she said she uses ChatGPT as her therapist. I'm not sure that I think that's the best idea. I don't know.
It's a good price.
It's very well priced, but there's an overall understanding of that. Not only does my physical health need to be checked on a regular basis, but my mental health probably needs to be checked on as well, because it does influence the way that I interact with other people and with my work.
Wow. And if you're listening out there, if you're a manager, don't send your person to ChatGPT for the therapy.
Yes, that was not.
Although who knows? Maybe it's good.
It's better than nothing, I guess.
So what else would you say kind of when you define culture? Because we always hear that word and some people say to me, what does that mean exactly? How would you define culture for people? What do you guys say?
Yeah, I think it's important to have a common definition. And the definition that we use is that culture is a collection of the behaviors of the people within a team, group, or organization. So if we think of culture as a collection of behaviors, it gives us several things to think about. One is, if that's true, then culture is the responsibility of every person. It's not leadership's responsibility. Now, leadership sets the tone, but if everyone contributes their behaviors, then everyone contributes to the culture. And then if it is the collection of behaviors in a team, group, or organization, it also suggests that anytime a group of people get together, a culture emerges, whether it's your kids' soccer team, your social group, your team that you work for, the entire organization. Every organization, every group of people has a culture, whether by design or by default. What we want to work on is intentionally crafting that culture. Now, I'm going to kind of contradict myself. I don't think that we can create a culture. Cultures exist. What we can create is an environment. And we create an environment where the behaviors that we want to see can thrive and grow. And we can create an environment where behaviors that we don't want to see get choked out and squelched. That's our role as leaders when we're leading this thing called culture. I want to think of it as kind of like you're a gardener, right? And the behaviors that you want to encourage are like flowers that you're watering and feeding. Those are the behaviors that you want to encourage. And then you want to choke out the weeds, right? So those behaviors that we don't like to see, we want to do our best to say, that's not happening here. That's not the way we act. That's not the way we behave. And that really illuminates a path, a behavioral path for employees. So they know this works here, that doesn't. And then I think the biggest aha that leaders get when I talk to them is, you're not for everyone. Your organization, you're not going to be for everyone. I mean, I talk about Southwest Airlines all the time, and I say, I'll ask, how many of you have flown on a Southwest Airlines plane? And nearly everyone raises their hand. And then I say, now raise your hand if you don't like flying Southwest. And I guarantee you half the room shoots their hand up. But Southwest isn't for everybody. Neither is your company. So figure out what you're about, who you're for, and I mean employee and customer, and be that. Like, be all in on that. And that's what makes me frustrated about Southwest now, is they're making headlines every day. We can blame the private equity that owns them, Elliott, I don't know, but they're changing. And they're losing that thing. They're becoming like everybody else. Financially, they've got a big issue right now, and that's how they're trying to solve it. But they're solving it by being what every other airline is. And it's kind of, for me, it's like watching a really old good friend make really bad mistakes. And you're like, no, don't do that. Not that
with
mistake.
a man.
Yes, that's the wrong guy. No.
Yeah, don't just become what he
that.
wants. I love it. All right. So that's a great explanation for culture. And I think if people can think about it as those set of behaviors that everybody on every level is doing and holding themselves accountable, I think that also takes a little bit of the pressure off of leadership all the time. It's just that you have to start by holding people accountable. And then what I find is that people will hold each other accountable if you've got a really strong culture, one way or another, negatively or positively,
Totally agree with that. I like that you said, that everyone has to buy into these behaviors. Everyone has to align with them. And it does become self-monitoring in that we will monitor ourselves and each other if we have this understood, shared, agreed upon set of behaviors. And I like them written down. And the reason I like them written down, and a lot of organizations, most organizations that I talk to have values, right? We've written these values, but few of them have the second piece of it, which I think is I think values, absent behaviors are a silly piece of art on your wall and they're meaningless. The behaviors are what really engage those values. So I want your organizational values, first of all, to be relevant. And sometimes they were passed down by my grandfather's grandfather and they don't have any meaning anymore, but we feel like we have to hold on to them for some historical reason.
Nostalgic. Yeah.
If it's not serving us anymore, and if it's not serving us into the future, if our values aren't identifying us in the marketplace to attract top talent and attract the best customers, then our values aren't doing what they need to do, right? But then the way that we really energize and supercharge those values, once we've made sure that they're the right values for our company, is we give them behaviors, very specific behaviors. So if I say, I pick on integrity, not that I don't want people to have integrity and not that I don't want organizations to have integrity, but I think that's kind of a table stakes value, right? I assume you have integrity, right? But even if that's one of your values, I want to know, what does integrity mean in my organization? Because it's going to mean something different to every person. And I don't know. And the other reason I pick on integrity is I believe that as consumers, we assume you have integrity. And if you didn't, we wouldn't use you. I'm probably not going to seek you out because, oh, wow, you have integrity as a value. That's not going to move me to come work for you. That's not going to move me to come purchase your products or goods or services. What's different about you? What makes you unique? What makes you stand out? Those are the compelling values that are going to lead us into the next generation.
Yeah, I love it. Someone told me Enron had integrity up as a value.
That was their number one. That was their number one value. Yep. It was ICE was their acronym, and integrity was their number one value. So every organization has values. Some of them they're proud of, and some of them they live and lean into. But most do, unfortunately, a poor job.
Right. And they didn't have behaviors. So do you help companies create those actual behaviors, or do you just interview them? Do you run sessions with their employees? Like, how do you do that to come up with that?
What I encourage organizations to do, and yes, I run workshops that help. We bring a cross section of the organization together. So if you've got 30 or fewer people in your company, we'll bring everybody in. If you've got a lot of people, we'll bring a cross section of people in. I don't want leaders creating the values. I don't want leaders creating the behaviors. I want the organization creating the values. I want the organization creating the behaviors. Because if leadership goes off in a one-off and they come back and like they're Moses coming down from the mountain, here are your values. No, those are your values. Yeah. So I want everyone to be involved in that. So we do it takes about a day and a half, and we get these values really aligned. We get the behaviors very specific, and then the fun begins. Then we go into what we call integration. I think about the life cycle of an employee. From the first time that an employee would ever come into contact with us, it might be our website, some sort of advertisement, right? I want the behaviors, the values and behaviors to be evident in the way that we recruit, hire, onboard, orient, performance manage, reward, recognize. Every time the organization intersects with the employee, I want those values and behaviors to come screaming out at everybody. I want your employees to almost mock you that when you come into the room within 2 minutes, Christine's going to say something about the values. Yes, when it's that, when we can anticipate it that well, then we actually have these values and behaviors that matter and have meaning.
That's great. And I bet you it probably energizes the groups too. You get the data and you get the information out of it, but they're probably also more bonded, more connected, more enthused, inspired just by doing the process.
And I like that, because where you're not going, Christine, is to happy. They do feel connected. They feel like they matter. They feel encouraged. They feel supported. They feel challenged. And again, I don't want us to chase happiness. So those are the things that I do want us to focus on, that I do want us to be a part of.
I'll take us off track for a second on that happiness thing, because I'm curious. I love how you defined that we're not chasing happiness. I'm curious how you came up with that. Like, how did you recognize that we were doing that? Because I also hear a lot of CEOs go, "Oh, I just want my employees to be happy," or "I just feel like no one's happy," or like, where did you, what happened in either your own life or in the business where you started to be able to identify that so clearly? Because I've never heard anybody say it like you just did.
It's really the data that we've done around. So the culture think tank was the brainchild of a few of us who said, we know that what we does work. We just can't prove it. And so the technology did not exist until about 5 or 6 years ago. So now the technology has allowed us, we ask employees how they're feeling, and we ask one question about feelings, and they have 30 feelings from which to choose. And we ask the question in this way: from a work and life perspective, what one word would you use to tell us how you feel right now? So the reason that we care about how they feel from a work and life perspective, because I might be really frustrated at home, but even though it doesn't have anything to do with the organization, I'm still darkening the doorway with all that frustration walking into the organization, right? So my understanding of happiness is really data driven, that those organizations that have happier people, they do behave differently, but when we're chasing happiness, what starts to happen is we start to chase happiness with things. And it's very hard. We push the threshold of happiness, kind of that cognitive threshold to happiness. We'll be happy when the next thing happens, or when we give you the next thing, or when we never really get there. So I want us to put happiness to the side and say, happiness is hopefully a byproduct of us doing all of this other stuff correctly, and not, if I'm going to make my employees happy by giving them something, by doing something for them, becomes this, it kind of creates this culture of what else you got, right? And it becomes a little entitled. And then we start building on top of, now we're doing this program on top of this program on top of this program, so everybody can be happy, and ends up nobody's ever happy, right? Or not happy enough.
So how many employees a year are a part of your tool, would you say, just to give people?
We have over 2 million data points every year. So we are pulse poll. Your organization might take this, we call it a culture snapshot. And it really is taking a look at a picture of your organization from the inside out. How are your employees feeling, and what do they need from leadership? Those 2 questions, and we ask 5 questions, and it takes about 5 minutes. But those 2 things that we're looking for are, how do you feel and what do you need from leadership? And we have 5 different ways to ask that. And it gives us a couple of things. It gives us a culture score, so we can literally score your culture and tell you if it's helping you or hurting you. We have a well-being score, which tells us that our employees as an organizational whole, they're feeling either strained or stable or energized, which helps us know, if this is a good time to make some big change. Probably not if they're feeling, already pretty stressed. And then we look at what we call an anxiety rating, and it helps us understand, is anxiety influencing your organization? And then our tool kicks out an action plan. And it gives leaders, here are the 5 things to work on based on how your employees feel, based on what they're asking for of leadership. Here are the 5 things to work on during this next time period. It might be next month, next quarter, in order to improve culture, improve employee well-being, and mitigate anxiety as much as we can in the workplace.
What would be one example that you might give somebody that they need to work on? The company that they need to work on.
And the employees are really going to tell us that. So the tool is going to kick it out. But what employees are asking for the most right now, what we see, they're asking for, tell me how the organization is doing. And I think that's kind of an anxiety related feeling. Like, I want to know, are we okay? Are we? And when I tell leaders that, what I almost always get in return is, we always tell them how we're doing. Like, not enough, until their ears are bleeding. Yes, we know this. Yes, we've heard you. They probably are still going to be hungry for more. So they want more information on how the organization's doing. They want more information on how I'm doing. Give me more one-to-one time. Give me direction. Give me feedback. And then finally, the top third behavior that we see is stop assigning everything as a top priority. They, everything has to be done all right now. Give me, help me understand. And I think that we can do a better job of that as leaders, not making everything a top priority, by us as leaders slowing down and saying, okay, this month, this quarter, what are the 3 things that we have got to get done? And then cascade that down to our mid-level leaders and our frontline, so that everyone knows this is what we're doing. This is why we're doing it. This is why it matters. It alleviates a lot of the drama and the trauma that I see plaguing a lot of organizations.
That's great. I mean, really, if you think about it, that's 3 great tips. Those of you listening can probably assume that you can get better at. I mean, when you just said those 3 things in my head, I was like, oh yeah, I need to get better at that. Oh yeah, I could be clearer on that. Oh yeah, I could do that. So how is the organization doing? And I assume right now, especially with the tariffs or whatever's going on politically, everybody's worried. Like, is there something they're not telling me? Am I going to be out of a job? What's happening? Communicating prioritization. I mean, that is so key. A lot of people don't understand how to prioritize. I always tell this story, Tatiana, one of the producers here. Always give her, I'm like, okay, I need you to do this. Okay, we need to do this. Okay, we need to do this. And she did a great job of managing up to me one time. And she turned to me and she said, oh, okay, sure. What would you not like me to do in order to do this?
I love that. I love that pushback so much. And I wish that people would use it more, because it's not being disrespectful, but it's saying, I've got to, my plate runneth over and I want to do the things that you need me to do. Help me prioritize what you would have me do first, second, third, and what on this list does not need to get done because I don't wear a cape and fly in every morning. I drive a car or walk or whatever I might do.
And it was a really good moment for me because I went, what? Well, of course I went. And then I was like, well, what are you talking about? Let me see what you have on this list. And then I was like, oh, yeah, this doesn't need to happen right now. This can happen in a couple of weeks or whatever. I was just excited about it. But it was a really good moment because she never said no to me. She said yes. And tell me what I can move to the side. And that was a very good learning moment for me and probably for her too. And then I love the other one that you said of how the organization is doing, your top priorities.
And then one-to-one. So I want one-to-one. How am I doing? Yeah. How am I doing? So if we think about it, just kind of at ease for your audience, I want to know the direction of the organization. I want to know my direction within that. And then that prioritization is kind of how am I going to get there? So those are kind of those big 3 buckets. If we can do that well, I believe that people are attracted to those organizations that feel like they are hearing the currency that I like to say that we need to trade in is leadership asks, leadership listens, and leadership acts. And if I tie my action back to the fact that I ask, so I ask, I listen, I act. I ask, I listen, I act. If employees believe that's the currency in which we trade, it improves trust, it improves engagement, it improves our performance. That if they believe that that's the way that we act here, then we've won half the battle.
Amazing. So they get this tool. They go through this process of defining behaviors. Then they're giving pulse checks to employees pretty regularly. And then they're getting reports of very clearly things they can do.
Correct. So the tool, super easy. It's also very affordable and inexpensive, which that's what I love. But with technology being what it is, it's no longer you've got to pay thousands of dollars to get this. You just don't. So if you guys are out there paying thousands of dollars to have your finger on the pulse of employees, you don't need to. And but it's quick, it's easy, and it's super digestible. And people look forward to giving feedback if feedback is indeed used. So if you're doing any kind of assessment, I have a very sophisticated 5-point process that I like people to use. So tune into this. If you're using any instrument, any assessment, first of all, we assess, step 1. Number 2, we thank them for taking the assessment, right? So I took my time and I did what you asked and I did this assessment. Third is I want you to listen as if it's the first time you've ever heard it. Too often leaders see these assessments and they dismiss it. Oh, I know what they're talking about. That's an old thing it's still there. It's still alive and well. So to listen as if it's for the first time. Then I want to understand that. So I want to take the data and I want to validate it. And I want to validate it through conversation with employees. What did you mean by this? When you say you want to know what's the direction of the organization, tell me what more you want to hear. What are you unclear on? So I'm validating their answers through conversation. And then finally, I'm going to act. And when I act, I want to tie my action back to what they said in the assessment. They start to trust the assessment. It's not going to be used against me. It's not a tool to be vindictive or manipulative. They really want to know how we feel. They're really listening and they're really doing something about it. Problem solved.
Yeah. And also it probably like an arrow back to the beginning because it feeds them being more and more transparent on how they do those surveys too, right? On those pulse.
Absolutely. Checks. So assess, thank, listen, validate, act. That's the magic in my estimate.
I'm taking lots of notes. I I've got a lot of work to do.
Come
All
on.
right. What other trends? Are you seeing any other trends right now compared to the past, maybe? Like
The
overall?
trend
I mean,
that I don't like to talk about, but it's too evident not to. So we looked at behaviors all across the board, and we're looking at them kind of longitudinally. And the behaviors that have come out of COVID have not been great. So I'll give you an example. And this is in every industry, but I cut my teeth in commercial aviation, so I look at commercial aviation pretty hard. The number of in-flight incidences, meaning a passenger and a flight attendant, a passenger and a gate agent, maybe before they board the aircraft, have gone up over 50% since COVID. The problem is during COVID, you can kind of make a case for everybody was nervous and scared and whatever else. It hasn't gone down. We have changed. We are different. I believe what I don't like to see, we're kind of positioned a little gunning for, kind of itching for a fight. Come on. One of the things at Southwest, one of the things that I was partially responsible for, at least I had a hand in it, was if you've flown on a Southwest Airlines flight, let's say before COVID. So let me suspend reality for a minute. Go back to pre-COVID time when you got on a Southwest Airlines flight. And a lot of times the flight attendant would sing the safety announcements or do something fun or funny, get your attention. That's one of the ways that the value of fun was demonstrated at Southwest, was the way that the flight attendants interact with the flying public. They don't do that a lot anymore. And in fact, one of the things that they say in the pre-flight announcements now that they never said before COVID, and I don't like it at all, and this isn't just Southwest. This is, I fly all the time. Listen for it and see if you don't hear it. What they say is, we are here for your safety, which I appreciate. If there are any behaviors that are bothersome to you or you don't like, please let us know. And I feel like it's kind of like setting us up, like we're gunning, like, is anybody doing anything? What am I looking for? Kind of assuming poor behavior before poor behavior ever even stepped onto the aircraft. I don't like that.
Interesting. You just reminded me because I was on an international flight recently, and on an airline I don't usually fly. So it's the first time I've ever heard it. So I don't know if you've heard this before, but they said in their little opening speech, the flight attendant said, "Oh, we ask that you do not take photographs or video of any of our personnel without their expressed permission beforehand." And I was like, what are they going to do? That requires us to have our phones ready.
This might be getting a whole lot more fun than I thought it was going to be.
I was like, but to your point, automatically my brain started racing of like, what problems are going to happen on this flight that people are going to be like taping and putting up on, Instagram or whatever.
Let's not prime the pump for negativity. So those are some things that I see that, and it's, if you look, you can look up the statistics. It's not just in aviation, but we as a society are different than we were. And I'm not blaming COVID. It's just the timing. There's, I think, a lot that's gone into it. Without getting into a political conversation, I think our political setup now is a lot more adversarial than it's ever been. I'm not blaming one side or the other. I think both are complicit in having us be adversarial with one another. And our opportunity to sit down and talk and have discourse is really just not available anymore. And I think that's not good for us as a society. I think it's not good for us as a whole. And we both sides always want to talk, harken back to our forefathers and our forefathers. Well, when our forefathers, 2 men ran for president, one of them won, and the other guy was called vice president. So they, Aaron Burr kind of put a little shot through that, but that was the original intent, was not for us to be at odds with each other, but for us to come together. And I think that fabric has changed. And as organizations are part of the social fabric, it's changed the way that we're dealing with our employees as well.
Yeah. All right. And then just to end for today, because I could talk to you forever, and there's so many more questions. I'll have you on again just to go into it and to hear if there's any other new trends coming up down the line. But I would love to hear, we have a lot of people who are up and coming managers and supervisors and stuff that listen. And are there any other tips for that group in particular on how they can affect culture or how they can boost some of the positive aspects that you're talking about? Just little tips or little things that they can do.
Absolutely. I talk to people who are in very large organizations. They're not sitting at the top of that organization, but they can have an influence on their department. If you've got I say you can even have a culture of one, right? So if there's just 1 or 2 people in my organization, in my department, on my team, what are the behaviors that I lean into as a culture of one? What do I stand for? What am I about? What are the behaviors that I want to hold myself to account to every day, all the time? And that becomes as it turns out, that it's not only COVID that was contagious. Those positive behaviors can become very contagious in an organization. And other managers look to you and say, wow, you really, your team of 3, y'all seem to have the best productivity and y'all enjoy the work that you're doing and everybody's there on time and everybody seems to care. And those are the things that I want to see. And that is, you can be an oasis of a great culture in the middle of a bad one. If you're in a bad culture, I also encourage people to find a different job. It doesn't have to be that way. If you're working for somebody that's just a terrible culture, get out. There's so many organizations that are doing it well and doing it right. The number one reason why people leave a job is a difficult relationship with their immediate supervisor or manager, right? Most of us know that. The statistic that I like on the flip side of that is the number one reason why people stay. And our research shows us that the number one reason why people stay in a job is interesting work. So as a leader, one of the things I can do, I can make your work more interesting. I can help. What do you like to do? What are you good at? How can we give you those tasks that align to what you're interested in? I can't change your job description necessarily, but we all know there's some things that I'm doing that if I didn't have to do that stupid part of my job, I'd like it so much better. Maybe I can do that. Maybe I can help move things around a little bit, keep your work interesting and keep people growing so they'll stay with you.
I love it. Great advice, everybody. Thank you so much, Delise. Look up Delise Simmons, look up Culture Think Tank. It might just be the perfect tool for you or your organization. I think they have a lot of powerful data that they're creating and really helping to institute real sustainable change. So thanks, Delise.
Absolutely. Thank you, Christine. Thanks for having me. And check us out at theculturethinktank.com. And it's, again, we've priced it in a way that there is no financial barrier to entry. So come on and join us.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody, for listening. I'd like to give a special shout out to our podcast producer, Richard Francisco. Check out our notes for any details. And if you get anything out of this, please follow us. And if you enjoy it, please take a moment to rate us or write a comment. It will mean the world to us. We'd love to hear from you. And if you just can't get enough, follow me on TikTok and check out tlpnyc.com/podcast for more information.